Hello, my name is Zenka. This is Adam. We're from LightNet, and we're here today with Sandie Sedgbeer. She is the founder of the No BS Spiritual Book Club. She is a journalist, an author, a ghostwriter, and a marketer of incredibly amazing books that tie in spirituality and science into new expansion for our minds. She has started her career off in England, in London, in the fast-paced and competitive world of journalism. She then founded many magazines. She's written 6 books by international publishers. And she really has taken under her wings the people that Hay House has passed over, right? These are the people that she noticed, hey, wait a minute, this person is bringing new consciousness, new scientific ideas, new things to the world in ways that no one else has. And these people, even though they don't have a huge mailing list yet, these people deserve for their stories to be told. So she has supported writers and authors to bring their books out into the world. And she has also founded the No BS Spiritual Book Club, which is one of my favorite things on the planet. She interviews some of the world's most important thinkers, creatives, celebrities about what are the 10 books that changed their lives, right? I'm curious for you also to make some notes on these, because these are the things that really open our minds. We know from our consciousness research that books really do that. So we're going to delve into Sandie's career, how she works, how she helps these authors, what is the Spiritual Book Club, and how that works. And Adam's got some questions about consciousness in general. Sandie is a brilliant, brilliant woman, as you will see in the next hour and a half. So welcome, Sandie.
Thank you for having me.
Great. So Adam had the first question for you, and it's a fundamental question. So yeah, go ahead, Adam.
Yeah, I know we could spend the whole time on this one, but I wanted to kind of go into it because I think it totally gets passed by a lot of the time. And so I just wanted to talk with you about writing itself. So the written word is probably one of the most important inventions. It's up there with the wheel and with fire. And one of the founders of Google had said that the written word was an extension of our memory, like a physical extension of our memory. And so I just wanted to talk with you for a moment, really big picture, about what you think about the written word.
Wow. I mean, what would we do without it? You know, how would we communicate? I once read a book that said that we used to communicate telepathically, and then we started to develop the left side of the brain, and that's when language came on the scene. And I don't know if that's true or not, but books, I mean, God, what can you say about books? Aren't they just wonderful? They're my best friends. They're everything, when I've got nothing to do, there's always a book there, something to be read, something to be learned, something to be shared. Um, Words are so important. We all take them in individually. We all have a different perspective of what words mean, and they fascinate me because I could say to you, oh God, I'm dating this guy and he's really gorgeous, he's really hunky, and you might have an idea of someone who's really gorgeous and hunky, and then when you meet him you think he's not gorgeous and hunky. And I love the way that words mean different things to all of us, and there's so much tied into a word. I mean, when you study things like NLP, you understand that just with one sentence you can actually change someone's life. You can change the way someone is thinking at that moment. If a child falls over and hurts their knee and it's bleeding, and they're terrified, they think blood, I'm going to die. What you say to that child in the moment can make all the difference, and that will stay with that child for the rest of their life. So when we think about the power of words, and we only have to look at what's in our news feeds today to understand how words are being used to manipulate our thinking about everything. So, yeah, I mean, you could talk forever about words.
Yeah, and one of the things why do you think as we awaken in this world, right, or whatever you want to call it, um, there seems to be, I guess, there seems to be some sort of flip where you go, oh, and your consciousness expands to the point that you can't go backwards. Why do you think books do that for people? Like, why are they such a strong, powerful medium to get people to raise in their consciousness?
Well, here we come back to words again. I mean, a word can open a door for someone and completely shift their perceptions. I once interviewed a guy who said to me that when we hear something or read something um, that is so meaningful and true and out of our, frame of reference, the brain freezes for a moment. And in that space, that little space is where, you know, everything opens up for us. We completely have a shift of perception and we cannot go back from that. Once that's happened. And it's really interesting when you think about why people won't change their minds about something. Um, there's a wonderful book that I came across. Goodness, I wish I'd found it sooner because I'd love to have interviewed this woman, but she's passed over. But it was by a clinical psychologist called Elizabeth Meyer, and the book was called Extraordinary Knowing. And she has encapsulated all of the proof. If people are skeptical about remote viewing, about all of the things, anomalous phenomena, she has studied all of it. And she came to it because she had one of those moments where something happened to her that did not fit with her idea of reality. And in that moment, she had this kind of cognitive dissonance, and it completely opened her up to something. And she thought, why has nobody studied this phenomenon? And so she decided to study it. And she was one of the first people to be working with, all of the people who did the remote viewing studies with the CIA. She's worked with ION. She's worked with so many, organizations and on so many studies as well that have shifted thinking. But she had that question: why is it that some people, in the face of all the evidence, will not change their mind? And it's to do with the way the brain apparently operates with, I think they call it near and far. When you're looking at pictures, you've got what you're looking at is in the front, the near and the far, and whether you can actually shift easily. It's a bit like magic eye, pictures where you see one thing, and then if you look at it long enough, it might change. And that's what you have to get people into, that kind of state, in order to actually change their philosophies and their beliefs about something. But I think that some words, some people have a way of writing, of stringing words together that just cuts through everything, and it just goes straight there. And the heart knows it. And, the heart and the brain, they work together. And you have that moment of pause. Boom, there it is. Complete change.
Yeah,
Yeah. I think it reminds me of the elegance of when fiction tells the deepest truth. I wanted to kind of shift gears just a little bit and go into.
You're just a little bit faint there, Adam. I'm having trouble hearing you.
Okay.
I think I've got my sound up. No, yes, I think it is up as far as it'll go.
Okay. Is this better for you?
That's better. That's better.
Okay. I wanted to shift gears just a little bit and go into your roots as a writer. I recall a story you shared, and if you'd like to go into it, as a segue for this question, that'd be great, about your mom and her desire for you to not take chances and be a typist. And if you'd like to share that story and kind of go into what it's been like to carve the way as a woman in your profession. I've noticed, there's parades today that people go and they see they're drinking and having a great time. But when we first did those parades, people threw bottles and rocks at us. And so there's been some battles on the way to where we are today. And so, yeah, however you'd like to do it, if you'd like to share some on what that challenge.
Well, apparently, and I don't know how true this is, but there's a story in my family that I told my mother when I was 4 that I was going to be a writer. And I don't know how a 4-year-old even knows what a writer is. But I do know that as long as I remember, that's where I was going. And so I made sure that, the different streams we took in school, according to the professions we wanted to enter, I was totally fixed all the way. There was nothing else for me, but that's what I'm going to do. But my mum thought that I should play it safe because, you're a working class girl and you can't expect to, do things above your station, that old phrase. And, you should get a job as a typist. It's safe. And even after I published my first books, my mother would always say to me when I called her, "Have you got a lot of typing to do this week?" I think she thought I typed labels for a living. But it wasn't difficult to get a job in publishing. It was very easy, in fact, because I didn't, go straight into the editorial side. I went into the circulation side of Britain's oldest and most prestigious satirical magazine called Punch. And I was working in the circulation department. But very quickly, I changed jobs to another publishing company. I kept moving around until I found one that would let me work in the editorial department and give me opportunities to write, teach me what I needed to know. And I had a wonderful boss along the way, who was American. And, I've attracted Americans into my life, which is in alignment with my astrology chart because America's all over my chart. And this man, gave me an opportunity to really write, not just tiny little things, but, whole articles, etc. And introduced me to a lot of people. He was very much ahead of his time because these were the days when in England, if you worked in an office, you had to wear a skirt. Well, not at this place. This place, had an American kind of ethic and people were wearing hot pants and, it didn't really matter. The magazine was Penthouse, so maybe that's got something to do with, why everybody was so open. But it was one of the best jobs I've ever had because it introduced me to so much. And that's really where I started kicking off as a journalist.
One of the interesting things to me about your career as you had built it over the years and you started writing and you're writing for other people, magazines, starting magazines, all these things, is your desire was so strong to do some of these things. You learned some interesting things about consciousness and manifestations. And it's not surprising that you wanted to go to America because you felt like, okay, maybe this is where the next of the next is. Talk about a little bit how you manifested your role in America when you came first.
When I look back on my life, I think I manifested everything without realizing it because I didn't believe anything was beyond me. I thought you can, if you put yourself out there, you can do the things. And I proved it to myself. But with America, I mean, that was such an interesting thing because I just finished contract with a client, a big contract. And so I was in between jobs. My daughter was leaving home. My son had left home. And I thought, maybe there's something else waiting for me. And there was a magazine that had started 10 years before in England. And I'd picked up a copy of it. And they were talking about their 10th anniversary issue and how they were ready to move on. And they wanted they wanted to hire somebody who wasn't just, a magazine editor, but also knew a lot about marketing and everything to do with magazines. And because I'd done everything in magazines, I thought they're talking about me. And they lived they were based 250 miles away from London. Um, but I really felt strongly that this magazine had shown up for me to run this magazine. And I spoke to their astrologer, who was a friend of mine, and he said, let me do your chart. Did my chart, said, apply for the job because you're perfect for this. So I applied for the job and I never heard anything. And a couple of months went by and I knew these people were going to be exhibiting at a, mind, body, spirit fair. So I went along to meet them, thinking, I just present myself and they'll go, oh, we're so grateful to have you, And the woman just looked at me and went, oh, yeah, you're that, and she kind of dismissed me. And I kind of went into one of those, well, no, this is wrong. What, I'm meant to be working for this company. And everything was pointing towards that. And I was talking to a friend the next day about, well, what was that all about? Because everything was set up for it. And she said, well, has it occurred to you that if you can leave London and go and live that far away, you can go to America? And that was like, oh my God. Oh my God, I can go to America. Yes, I can do this. How can I do it? So I got in touch with my old boss from Penthouse. He set up a few conversations with various people at different magazines. My sister found a .com that was starting up in San Diego that were looking for somebody with my kind of background. I had conversations with them, and then they completely disappeared. And at that point, something's going wrong here because I know there's a path and I've been on this path and it's been pointing me in this direction. And so I've got to do it. So in the end, I went to stay in Canada with my sister where she lived. And I thought I've got 6 months to manifest a job in America so that I can get my work permit. And I was in a secondhand bookshop. She lived on a tiny island. Wasn't much there at all, but there was this secondhand bookshop, and out dropped a copy in front of me. People talk about books jumping off shelves. It really does happen. And it was called The Silva Method of Mind Control, Jose Silva. And I thought, I'm going to study this. So every night I'd practice and I do. And then I one day just decided to go on Monster Board. It's time for me to look for a job. And the first thing that came up was the job in San Diego. And I thought, I knew I was meant for that job. So I wrote to the guy and asked him what had happened. And he couldn't deal with the distance before, but he said, come to San Diego on your dime and we'll discuss it. So I thought, well, if this method of mind control really works, I'm going to put it into operation and see what happens. So I practiced it every night. I started doing the visualizations, but I thought I've got to know that this is me that's made this happen. So I built in 3 things that had to happen on that day to prove to me that it was my creation. So I went to San Diego, and the 3 things that I'd built in, one was he's going to offer me the job on the spot. The second was he was going to take me to lunch. And the third was he was going to drive me around San Diego to see my new home. And they all happened, all 3 of them. And so I got the job, got into America. And in the meantime, I was going backwards and forwards between Canada and America and realized I didn't want this job. I'd manifested it, but I didn't like the company. I didn't like them at all. And then I manifested another one. And it was as if I was just meant to be in America. And that was it. No questions.
That is so incredible. So incredible and all culminated. Oh, wow. Wow.
So Sandie, could you tell us a little bit about resonance marketing and what you're doing for the authors that you work with?
So when I was back in my magazine days, I was very curious about everything to do with magazines. And a lot of people said to me, you shouldn't be, you're a journalist, you should stay a journalist. You can't have too many, all those strings to your bow. But I wanted to find out about how they marketed the magazine, how, the circulation, all of it. And I also had this, I don't know what the impetus was, but I remember writing an article for a magazine, a health magazine that I was working on about my time at a big health spa, big one in England that was quite famous. And I just felt this isn't right. I'm telling people about the time that I had here. They want this time. Why can't they have this time? So I talked to the publisher of the magazine, and I went to the guy who owned the spa, and I said, what if our magazine took over, the spa for a week, and and you give them a special price, so all these people who couldn't afford you under normal circumstances can come here and have just an incredible experience. So, and I found that I didn't really think too much about it, but I was doing things for the readers of the magazine all the time. It wasn't about the editorial side. I wanted to know, who were the readers? What did they want? What did they think about? What were their needs? So I started to create all kinds of things where I could meet the readers and they could have experiences. And then I got headhunted by an advertising agency who wanted me to breathe new life into some of their old direct marketing clients' things. And I started, I came from a magazine background. I'm looking at these catalogs that are just full of ads. And so I started saying, why don't you put, if this is a gardening catalogue, why don't you put a yearly gardening calendar in there? Why don't you put some tips in there? People will hold on to it for longer. And so I started doing these things that, created more value for the customer, and it increased the business and it increased loyalty and customer retention. And that made me realize that, you don't have to market to people in a slick way. All you have to do is meet people where they're at and, meet them where their values are and give them what they need. And you've got a customer for life. So I started calling that resonance marketing. And when I was living in America, I was still doing a lot of corporate work for clients in Europe. And while I was also straddling the spiritual arena by producing spiritual online magazines and doing interviews for spiritual TV programs. And people kept saying to me, you really need to be helping spiritual therapists, healers, people in this arena who are great at what they do, but don't know how to market themselves. And so, for me, it's very simple. The best way to market yourself is show people who you are. Be authentic, give them things for nothing and let them experience you. Because if they can experience you, and the way I see it is, we're talking right now. And for me, there's a thread of energy between us, and there is nothing in the way. There's no bumps, there's no lumps, there's nothing in the way. It is a straight line, heart to heart. And that's how people need to talk to their followers. Simple. Resonance marketing, simplest thing in the world.
That is so powerful. And it's so elusive to so many people because they feel like, well, it took me my whole life to come up with this book idea. I don't know the first thing about taking that across into the other world, and getting the followers and getting the people. But that is really, really great advice. And I love the way you have thought about this over the years and really innovated, been headhunted for your methods. Very powerful. So where did you get the idea for the No BS Spiritual Book Club? And I think we should tell the listeners a little bit how this brilliant project, what it looks like and how it began.
Well, books are my life. They've always been there. I do a lot of shows, so I'm always being pitched books. to interview the authors. And I've been doing this for so many years, and about 5 years ago, I think, I'd had a lot of pitches for books that were just derivative. It was just rehashes of other people's work. It was very lightweight. The energy wasn't there, the substance wasn't there, and I started to get a bit frustrated. And I found, I have this little habit: when I get a book like that in my hand, I toss it across the room. And I was doing this more often, and I'd come off a show, and I remember thinking, God, there's so many people waking up, and they're eager to find their path, and they need books that are substantive. And all they're getting, their attention is being pointed to all of these books that, for me, were a lot of bullshit, basically, because the publishers had the money to promote the books. And I thought, that's just plain wrong. Where are these people going to find these books? And so I was having this little mental rant with myself, and it was as if someone just went, have a look at this, and unfurled, I don't know, a screen. And on that screen was everything. I got it in an instant. This book club and the way to do this book club. And I remember thinking, wow, what a great idea. I'm not going to do it because it's too much work. I'm going to have to put money into it. I've pioneered stuff before, and if you can't see it all the way through, what's the point? You're going to have to fold it at some point. I was just, no way. But isn't it a great idea? And I kept looking at it out of the corner of my eye, and it was like sitting on my shoulder, and it wouldn't go away. And little thoughts would come into my head. Oh, you could do this, and oh, you could do that. And then I started just playing with a website just to see, And after about a year, I realized this is mine to do. I've got to do this. And I thought, what am I going to call it? And I was talking to Lee Harris, and Lee said, well, what do you want to call it? And I said, well, I'd like to call it the No BS Spiritual Book Club. And he said, well, then why don't you? And I said, oh, that's very irreverent, I mean, people won't like that. And he said, just do it. Just do it. So I did it. And the way it works is, it's not about me being the arbiter, the person who says, read this book, although I do share books that make a big impact on me. But I thought the best way to do this is to create an archive of trusted recommendations. And who better, for us to follow than the teachers and the authors whose work we love. We want to know what got them, from whatever they were doing as a teenager to the place they're at now. So I just started asking a lot of the people that I'd interviewed if they would give me 10 books and if they'd come on and talk about them. And a number of things, began to become very clear to me over the last 4 years. I mean, this is not my invention. I think this is something that's been given to me to shepherd. And little nuggets, little Easter eggs, make themselves known. Number one, someone said to me, oh my God, you realize what you're doing? Some of those older people, the ones that have been around a long time and may not be here for much longer, you're capturing their wisdom through the lens of the books that influence them. And so there's information that's coming out of them that they might never get an opportunity to share in any other way. And I thought, wow, that's brilliant. That's wonderful for us to have that, and it's wonderful for them. And then I also started hearing from a lot of the guest contributors. I thought that was going to be really hard. It was really hard. I wasn't sure I wanted to do it. But oh my God, I had a life review. And over again, guests were telling me they had a life review. And it was like, you can have your life review without leaving your body. And they began to understand their own life. Oh my God, I'd forgotten, I was in that place when I read that book and this one. And so it's a wonderful thing for the guests. And because it's such a wonderful thing for them, it's a wonderful thing for the viewers because they get to see these people unplugged. They get to see these people being authentic. You're getting to see who they are, what made them part of who they are, and they're not pitching anything, nothing at all. So for me, they're the best interviews I've ever done, simply because they're so joyful.
Yeah,
And that's the No BS Spiritual Book Club.
that's really
Yeah.
wonderful. Zinka, that's her list, right?
Right. No, this is the list. So I just put in the chat here and I put it through the different broadcast partners, thanks to Portal to Ascension, New Realities. These are some of the books that over the last 4 years, she has said, what is the pattern here? Now, these are the big books, right? Oftentimes, Sandie's guests will bring about these very powerful books that you're like, oh, I got to read that. This is one of those minor things. So though this is like, I feel like I want to read all this. So I'm going to read the list, the 4 agreements, right? This tiny, tiny book is the most influential book on for these great thinkers, you know, in the world. This is very fascinating. The Power of Now, right? Eckhart Tolle. You Can Heal Yourself, Louise Hayes. Many Lives, Many Masters, Siddhartha. The Alchemist, Man's Search for Meaning, which is on the Purpose Lab list, which I need to read. The Celestine Prophecy, John Livingston Seagull. So these types of books are the books that have really made people have that deeper curiosity and that deeper like before and after effect. So, and I agree with you, Sandie, you know, these guys, they've been interviewed 1,000 times about the same questions over and over again, but this is what made them tick. This is what made them, you know, be who they are.
Yeah.
So it's just such a powerful show that you're doing. You're broadcasting on OMTimes Radio, and it's just great to see, you know, you have 3 or 4 of these guests every month, and to get a window into their minds and then get this great reading list afterwards.
We ordered 4 of those for the
Did you?
yesterday.
You know,
Yeah.
the common denominator when you look at that is simplicity. The books that are the simplest and they cut straight through all the crap straight to your heart, they're the ones that have influenced people the most. I mean, you could live your life by the 4 agreements. You know, if you said to your child, go out into the world, my son or my daughter, you know, and here's the only 4 things you've got to remember. My goodness, that's life-changing.
One of the things that always impressed me so much about that book is that the 4 agreements are on the back cover. And it's like, you can have it for free, but if you need me to explain it to you, then go ahead and buy this.
Yeah.
I always loved that about that one.
Yeah.
Where do you see the No BS Spiritual Book Club going?
I think it has unlimited potential. I would love to take it into the streets. I would like people starting their own No BS spiritual book clubs, and we can help them, you know, with the kinds of books that they should be offering. I would love to see that grow to the point where, you know, there's so many people waking up and number one, they don't know what to read. Number 2, they don't know who to talk to. You know, they're frightened of saying something to some of their friends because, oh, you're into that woo-woo stuff. They need their community. You know, a No BS book club in your town, in your village, could be the place where people of like mind can find their tribe, not only read the books together and get to discuss them, and learn from each other's perceptions of that book, but also they would be having experiences just through reading these books, and they would have a little group of people that they could trust, that they can share those experiences with. So it's almost like having a, you know, psychic development circle or something like that. You could actually have these, you know, these could be anywhere, everywhere. And what I would like is for the No BS Spiritual Book Club to be the kind of umbrella for them, you know, providing them with the lists for their members, but also be able to bring some of these authors online so that they could actually talk to them. They could ask questions. They could, have these open events, open house events when they could meet them and really make this into a worldwide community. That's what I'd like to do with it. And I think it has the potential to do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and it's gaining, like, a lot of the snowball is gathering snow, because we even have one of our members like, oh wait, I want to help her, and I'm like, yeah, me too. So it's a really exciting all that's gonna it's time is ready. Now I wanted to ask you, since you've been in this over the years, this genre of science and spirituality, where have you seen, what can you describe the arc that you're sensing around, oh, this is hush hush, don't talk about it, like how, from the magazines you started earlier to where we are today, like what's actually happening with the movement in general, in your opinion?
I think it's becoming far more widespread than we know. And it's also kind of, what used to be woo-woo, it's settling into being just the way we are. A lot of people who've woken up, I know people, 2 years ago, energy, that's what, runs my television, isn't it? Who are talking about energy in a new way. And they have no idea that they've shifted. They have no idea that they wouldn't have been interested in these kinds of conversations. It's like there's a wave, and it's kind of just, and I remember I was very much engaged back, 20 years ago, when people were talking about the indigo kids and the crystal kids. And, I knew the people who had written all the books, and I produced a magazine around that to try and ground that information. And I remember one channel, who was the first person to talk about the crystal children, said one day, we're not going to call them indigos. We're not going to call them crystal children. We're just going to call them kids. And that's exactly what's happened, because we have all these children now, that have been around for 20, 30, whatever, how many years. And we don't classify them necessarily in the same way that we would have done before. We just understand that this new generation is connected in a way that, previous generations weren't. They have access to information, their skills, their abilities, it's almost like they're a step ahead. They're a quantum leap beyond us. And it's just happening naturally in society.
Yeah, I'm really seeing that, and I resonate deeply with that. It amazes me how some fringe ideas, and then you're almost afraid to talk about them, and then the next person that you talk with brings it up. There's been occasions where we're meeting some new people, and we're like, let's not talk about aliens, and it comes up, organically, and the next thing you know, they're telling you all of their stories about it, and it's just mind-blowing.
Isn't it weird how we keep that so quiet? That woman I mentioned, Elizabeth Meyer, with the book Extraordinary Knowing, when she had this experience that she couldn't, it just rattled her so much that in the end she had to mention it to a colleague, but she was afraid of what he'd say. And he said, oh, let me tell you my story. And then someone else said, well, let me tell you my story. And suddenly there's all these people coming out and telling their stories, like, okay, everyone, it's safe, we can come out now.
Yeah. Well, so I wanted to kind of touch on that. So I don't know if you're familiar with Donald Hoffman, a consciousness researcher. He
No,
was sort of the first person to kind of come out and say, I don't think that consciousness is arising from our physiology. What he was saying was I think that consciousness creates our physiology. And so it's an idea that we're surrounded by energy, and then consciousness comes in and creates everything we see and interact with, possibly for the purpose of providing us with experience.
Well, we could say consciousness is that wave, but I like what Jude Currivan says. Consciousness is not what we have, it's what we are. So we too are consciousness. And we are, there has to be this intermingling, this exchange that's going on all the time.
And so one of the things we've noticed recently is these were kind of fringe ideas. And now we're beginning to talk with quantum physicists. And at the end of talking about their careers, they come to, I think I'm going to revise things, because instead of the quantum field is creating consciousness, consciousness is creating the quantum field.
Yes. And this is the bit I love, because we're seeing all of the, the physicists, and, we can't deny it anymore. And I've always liked to ground everything, because you can't make change, if you can't ground it, then people are not going to believe it. And you've got to have some, credentialed people advocating some of this in order for others. But I remember when I started this online spiritual magazine called Planet Lightworker in 1999, I had a guy who used to write a column for me, and he was a NASA scientist. I can't remember exactly what he did, but he was working for NASA. And he said to me, there was a time, and I don't know when that time was for him, but there was a time when if you asked a scientist if he believed in God, he would say, don't be stupid. Of course I don't. I'm a scientist. He said, but now more and more, if you ask a scientist if they believe in God, and they say, well, of course I do. I'm a scientist. So it's becoming, it's mainstream. Spirituality is mainstream.
Let's go back to your core essence of how you help authors market in how you live in the world. Just like this conversation we were just having about authenticity. When you're courageous enough to call your thing the No BS Spiritual Book Club, because that's what you authentically actually wanted to call it, and how you're talking about, well, if you want to sell your books, be authentic with them from the day, from everything you do right there. So my question is, there's a lot of people that are wanting to write their authentic truth, or what is coming through them, from them. What advice would you have to people who want to be authors?
Well, a lot of people want to be authors, and a lot of people have a story well, everyone has a story to tell. But a lot of people think in order to be an author, I've got to think about the format. I've got to think about this. I've got to think about that. I've got to get it right. I've got to use, big words. I've got to make sure that the writing is, really precise, etc. And in all the things they're thinking about, they're obscuring what they should be doing. What they should be doing, and I was talking to a group of people just the other day, is you just need to write. Don't think about how you're going to write, just write, because you've got to connect with this part of you. You can't just do it all from there, because that's going to lead you astray. You've got to feel the flow of it, and you're not going to feel the flow if you're thinking about formatting, or let me look up in the thesaurus for a really good word, to express that. So it's really important that people just write, just get your pen and write whatever you feel you want to say. Later on, you can talk to an editor and look at, okay, how's the flow? How do we, get this into a format that people will want to read? Those things are the later job. They're not the first job. The first job is just open up your heart, open up that connection and write. And the other advice I give people, because nowadays, it's a level playing field. We can all self-publish if we want. We can't all have a bestseller, but we with enough make our books, help them sell. But the other thing that people need to think about is how they're going to present their book. you know, how they're going to market their book. And I'm a great advocate in being very, very creative and very, very authentic. Just going out there and, you know, getting yourself a camera and talking to your audience and sharing some of the stories in there. There was a thought I just had then that I wanted to share with you, but it's completely gone. So maybe it'll come back in a minute.
Well, yeah, this is such great advice because that's, you know, the impact, like you said, of your book or whatever you're doing. It's like if it doesn't reach that heart to heart thing, it doesn't land, right?
No,
So
it does.
if, like you said, that has to be the first thing, no matter if the words are right or wrong, you know, the finesse, the order of things. Like, I love that advice of just really trying to tap into, you know, if no one was watching you dance, how would you dance? And what is
Exactly. Exactly. You know, I'm working with a friend on one book, and I mean, what she's writing is beautiful and she's got some great stuff to teach, but you know, it wasn't engaging me. It was all head stuff. And it's good stuff, but that link. And then we were sitting talking about the book, and she was saying, well, I'm feeling, you know, that it's not quite. And she started to tell me a story of something. And I said, well, there it is, right there. There's your story. That's what you should open up this chapter with, because you had me. The minute you started telling me that story, you were so open, I was engaged. And that is how you will engage readers so that they then want to read some of the more heady stuff. The other thing that I did want to say that had slipped my mind is some people think they've got to, if they're going to write a book, it's got to be a big seller. You know, that's the whole point of it. I have there's a lovely woman who wrote to me about 14 years ago who had lost her husband, and part of her grieving process was to write. And she'd written a children's story, and it was a very, very simple little about a dancing hippo. And she wanted to publish this children's book. And, you know, I said to her, the children's market is notoriously hard to break into. Really, really hard. But, you know, I encouraged her to turn the prose into rhyme because it would appeal more to younger children. They love that. And just go ahead and do it. And her grieving process, you know, was intermingled with creating this book. So by the end, she found an illustrator who did a beautiful job, and she actually printed a number of copies. It didn't go very far, but she started taking it to schools. And so she was being invited into kindergartens to read the book to children. She put it on Facebook, and then a charity, I think it was in a third world country, saw it. And they came to her and they said, we love this story. And she ended up giving them loads of copies of books for the children that they were working with. They started promoting her. She created this collaboration with them. And everything that she'd done through this grieving process and wanting to produce this book, you know, it was so alive and it was helping lots and lots of people, not millions. She wasn't making money out of it, but what she got in return. So not every book is about making money. You know, you never know what the purpose of your book is going to be. So people should just go ahead and write it, you know, and publish it, because you can do it very cheaply these days, and you don't have to, you know, mortgage the house and invest a lot of money in it. Just do it and see where it goes. Because once it's out there, you know, it's words again. Once that energy is out there, it has its own way of finding its place.
Yeah, and before you ask the next question, that's, I mean, your No BS Spiritual Book Club is the epitome of that, because these are major celebrities, thinkers, scientists. Those books influence them, and some of them, like you said, they're not the bestsellers, but they're the ones that influence the thinkers of our time, right? To be who they are. So it can really be life-changing for people. Yeah.
Yeah, we were sitting around the dinner table one night and we were talking about impact. And if you had an impact on two people and you could pass a contract onto them that said, the only thing I'd like in return is that you have an impact on two people.
Yeah.
32 times is 8 billion people.
Wow.
Holy.
That's it.
That's it.
They'd only have to execute that contract 32 times and have an impact on two people, and you will have reached everyone.
Yeah.
So my real question here is going to be about how one finds their voice. But let me ask it in sort of a contrived way, and it's very relevant to our time. So we have this person, and they're an honest person at heart. They just feel really stretched for time. And so they get plot points. Here's how it starts. Here's some fun stuff that happens in the middle. And then we have this big ending. But I don't have time to, this is what they're telling themselves. I don't have time to fill in the blanks, so I'm going to turn to AI. And so I'm calling it an honest person's use of AI in their writing. And I'm really feeling pretty deeply that we're not going to see their voice in that. So,
well, you're right. You know, I do know people who've done exactly that. And I've said to them, you know, use it as inspiration, as a direction to go in, you know, but you know, it's got to be you. It's got to be you. I mean, you know, if a book comes to you, you know, like the No BS came to me, then it's mine to do. And the energy of that, you know, I have to be feeding that with my energy as well. If I gave it to a robot to do, it would just lose all impact. People would feel the absence of something. They wouldn't know what it is, but they would feel the absence. And so it's a difficult one because, you know, I came across something the other day in my, you know, working at an advertising agency and, you know, marketing days. I've written so much stuff, and I came across a piece that I had written probably about, I would say, 20 years ago. And it's still out there somewhere, and it is being sold as a direct marketing package. The whole idea, the words are there. And when I saw it, I recognized that. Oh my God, that's the piece I wrote. And it's, you know, all of our work is going to be out there. In the same way that every word is out there through the books, every word that, you know, or every phrase that we've ever coined is in some search engine somewhere, some AI's little brain, you know, it's all out there. But we can't give ourselves over to it, you know, because this, you know, most authors will say to you, there's a point, you know, when you're writing where you lose yourself and something else seems to be taking over. And then you read what you've written and you go, wow, that's good. Who wrote that? And, you know, you can't get that if you're using AI. That's what you've got to do, because that way of connecting does so much more than just, you know, connecting you for what wants to come through you. I've seen people write a book that goes nowhere, a fantastic book, but goes nowhere because they don't need it to go anywhere, because the very writing of it was their catharsis, and it changed, you know, it helped them deal with the anger, or it changed their whole view about the situation they were, you know, it's the process of it. And that connection that you're going to have in that process is really important.
Yeah, I can see people who've used the AI. I mean, one of the things I would prompt them with is I would like someday for someone to put into AI in the voice of Adam Capel rather than the AI itself. So finding that voice is instrumental to communicating what it is we have brought to this world to express.
And the voice alone has so much, you know, power in it. Excuse me. I'm having a bit of a, with my voice at the moment.
Yeah.
You can talk amongst yourselves.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, so, you know, I think it goes back to what Sandie was saying about, you know, how some voices carry a far away because they land and they resonate with people's truth and their authenticity. And then if, you know, the AIs are basically brilliant. I mean, I'm amazed what they can write. It's like, wow, like it's a compendium of knowledge, but it's a little bit head heavy. So if we need to bring this back down to our, like, the guttural heart part of it, that's where it's important for you guys to just get that out, you know, and come from that place. So we have Mary Edwards, who's an author, here to ask you a question here. So Mary, welcome. It's good to see you.
Hi, Mary.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah,
Yes.
we can.
Anyway, great to see you, Zenka. Oh my God, I've missed you. And you're all so inspirational. I'm on the edge of my seat. Yeah, I did this book with Barbara Lamb years ago. That's me when I went on a spacecraft at age 5. And I did Inspiring Mavericks recently to get kids to get involved in space and stuff. And then I did this, never with an intention to make any money, but just to get my voice out a little bit. But anyway, thank you for this brilliant, wonderfully moment that is really inspirational. So thank you. I love the no BS. Such a time we need no BS on every level, as we know.
Absolutely. Yeah.
My question is, you know, we're all here for similar reasons. How do we get our words out? And all I know is from being an artist and a designer and architect and stuff and doing everything from this Star Trek logo to now I've been doing off-planet habitats inside of planets for the last 40 years, which is just too weird. It's like I know some of this. My dad was a rocket scientist and I worked at NASA, blah, 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 working on the International Space Station. And one thing I learned from that is just the use of color and design, the power of color, the power of design with story. I mean, I was putting in color in the International Space Station sort of first, and we did a full-size mock-up. I realized then through all the testing that we did on that, and then doing this book, I mean, I'd worked on different, you know, worked at different firms. We did books and international stuff. But this, when I got the comments, people said, I loved your hand-drawn art. It was, you know, 24 pages, simple. And I want to do another and a couple more to really tell my story a little bit more about, obviously, the authenticity that you're doing is unbelievable. Your suggestions are brilliant from all three of you. What would you do now? I mean, I did 3 little books during the last few years because all my interior projects shut down during COVID, and I started doing art again. And we know about how art and design and community is so important, and honesty and authenticity and transparency. And for those of us who have all had off-planet experiences and weird experiences, I sort of shut down for a couple of years because I was, you know, people didn't maybe necessarily want to hear my voice. I interviewed hundreds of people with Barbara and in different ways. What would you do? I mean, other than authenticity, what would you write now? I mean, if you were going to write a book today, right now yourself, I know you've written amazing books. I'm blown away by your energy and your level of communication to all of us who are here wanting to do a little bit more. What would you do now? I mean, if you were going to write a book today and just get it out there, because a lot of us are like Zenka, we're all bold women who just went for it. And you've really done it so successfully and with such passion and courage and kindness, loving kindness, which we don't have a lot of in some levels today. What would you do? I mean, literally, what would you do? I mean, I have a couple of my own ideas. I'm not going to hog your ideas, nor is anybody here, but I mean, it's the consciousness. Yes, when my dad was at Princeton with Einstein and they were talking about energy, we know it's this, you know, consciousness, finding the frequency that we can all work together in unification to come to a unified, positive time in this renaissance that we're coming into. We know it's about imagination, creativity, and communication and working together. Or any other, not necessarily what book would you, but what other insights might you have of how we can tell our story and really get it out there to expose ourselves to any group that wants to hear. And I think your book club, by the way, is brilliant. I would love to help you with anything here in San Francisco in the Bay Area, because I know tons of people like me who don't want to listen to one more. A lot of other than Zenka, and there are many wonderful people we know, but the way you're doing it is so professionally and so beautiful, Zenka and Sandie. I really appreciate that, and you too. What would you say? I mean, what else? What little nugget would you like to give us? That, I mean, I know you have many, and you've already given us a beautiful time of this. What else would you say to somebody like me, who I'm going to keep making books, whether they're
well, I'm curious
or not?
I'm curious to know, did you print many copies of your books?
Or yes, I've sold a bunch of these, but not a million of them. Yeah, I had them. I went through a publisher. This I went through a different publisher. This I went through an Indian publisher because my psychic friend wanted to use her Indian publisher. And this new book I'm doing, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just doing it. I'm telling my story about my family generations and why I'm just here to help inspire people that you can, if you're dyslexic and ADD, and I worked at NASA, you can do anything you want and expose this. And I was on the Travel Channel. I've spoken many different places. But to me, books are the place where you can really share your story. And I love drawing this, even though I'm not an illustrator. I love telling the story, and with Barbara to talk about ET friends. And I'm an ET human hybrid. We all are. The next step, and I've been working on a project for 2.5 years that's going to work here in Silicon Valley it's going to be incredible. And I'd love your voices included in this. And we're going to do a film, and she's going to make a ton of money. And we're going to do a couple of nonprofits and do some books to take this a step further. People don't want to read I don't want to read a 300-page book. So I do these small 8x10 books, but I'm not successful with it. I just do it out of my passion and my love of space, with generations of my family doing this and also being off planet a lot. Zenka knows this. So yeah, I just want to support you and help others like myself to just sort of dive in and do it with, how do you weave this together? I'm not a pilot. Yes, I'm been off planet a lot of times, but explaining that's weird. And I'm not really asking for your suggestions for me. I'm just asking what else, because it's a big topic to discuss and get validation for, as I know from speaking, not as much as you all have, obviously, but it's a tricky combo of telling the truth and also exploring. I mean, I've seen these habitats the thousands of times I've been on planet for a long time, and I'm not going to really talk about that because that'll freak too many people out and they won't believe it. And I can't show them where I've been. But we want to all tell our stories, and every story is important, and obviously mixed with color and design.
Absolutely.
Book format ignites. And I've taught kids. I taught at the Academy Bar College. I've taught art therapy and suicidals to kids and adults my whole life. We know the power of color and design and authenticity in our work. All of us here, and everyone has their own story to tell. So,
and everyone should tell their story. We live on stories. I mean, stories are our history, and we all love stories. And they're the best metaphors in the world, aren't they? And you can change someone just telling a story. But I think all of us should tell our story. Number one, because, if we think of ourselves as, a gazillion rays of one source, there's a gazillion ways that we've all lived our lives, a gazillion circumstances we've all had to navigate and grow through. You can't not hear those stories again and again and again and again and again and be impacted by them. Mm-hmm. Everybody's story can impact somebody, and I really do think that people should tell their story. I'm especially adamant about elderly people telling their story and leaving it for their grandchildren, because the kids don't want to know, but when the grandchildren get to a certain age, they want to know, who was that person? I mean, we have these TV programs, who do you think you were? And they look into your history, etc. Everybody wants to know what other people have experienced and lived through. And I think every adult should leave their memoir for their grandchildren, not their children, but their grandchildren.
That's really.
Yeah,
and for those of us who have been, I had electric shock treatment from age 3 to age 12, 35 times. I was in programs. I was in my lab. I was an experiment, like many of us were, my dad was a rocket scientist, had a huge aeronautical aerospace company that was massive all over the country and et cetera. And I want others. I've told my children the truth. He couldn't talk his story because he said we'd all be dead. And I've been talking to him a lot since he passed, like 50 times over the last few years. And he said, I'm sorry, we'd all be dead. We were told to be quiet. He was with Werner von Braun in 51 at Area 51. He knew Howard Hughes. Our family was involved with, Einstein, and he worked on the Manhattan Project for the last many years, working with those guys. So anyway, it's whatever our story is, we want to, like you say, and my kids are going, whoa, Mom, way too much woo-woo. We don't want to get into it. And I said, yeah, but I want you to know if I die tomorrow, and that's why I'm writing this new book, but I want it to just allow other people. And we were tested. We are an experiment. I'm happy I have 14,000 hybrid kids. I'm glad that I've been off planet my whole life. And I'm glad my father has told me the truth that he did too. And so did my grandfather, that both my sisters didn't get that gene, thankfully, in a lot of ways. And I've loved being isolated and confined myself in a lot of ways. And now I just want to help tap into other people's pain and the fear. And we're all healing together. And that's the whole point of this. It's communication, it's community. We need to share those stories, as you know better than anybody.
I think that there's a lot of things, Mary, that you're saying, like, it's the repression of our authenticity that makes us need to get this out, and like Sandie said, if the one generation before can't handle it, then at least it's written for the other generation. And it's interesting because in the chat you asked, Sandra, you said, oh, Sandie, what would you write if you wrote a book? And as I was preparing and researching for this interview, Sandie does, in some, where she chooses to put her time in the next, 20 years or whatever, who knows? But you have talked about doing your memoirs. So
yes,
Sandie, what
it's time today? Please, yes.
Yeah, lots of people, say I should write my memoir because I've had an interest in life and I've not necessarily walk the path that many people choose to walk. But I think about it a lot. I've started it. I haven't got very far with it. There's too much work with other things going on. But I thought, well, what is the whole point of me writing it? And I think the point has to be to show that it doesn't matter what happens to you in life, what your circumstances are, how you're born, how you are raised, you can still do anything.
Yes.
Anything. You just have to know that you can and go for it. And if you do the wrong thing, well, you can do a U-turn. How bad is that? And I think that I am a vastly different person than the child that I was. The experiences I had as a child, which weren't necessarily ordinary, they weren't extraordinary, but they weren't run-of-the-mill average, all have contributed to who I am. And they've all given me the resilience and the belief that I don't have to stay in that little box that someone might have put. I've got a picture of me at the age of 3 on my website, and I look like this scruffy little urchin, honestly, this chubby little kid who looks as though she should have dirt on her face. And I look at that and I sometimes think, anyone looking at that all those years ago, what would they have thought that child would grow up to be? We've all got pictures like that. And yet we grow up to be something entirely different. And so I think the reason for writing my memoir would be just to demonstrate, what I believe is that, you can be anything, you can do anything. But, one thing I do want to say, and I think this is the bottom line, for someone saying, well, why should I write a book? Why should I write my book? I think I've discussed this with you before, Zenka. I'm not sure, but I know someone who met some angelic beings who gave her a body of work, an incredible body of work. One thing these angels said to her is something that really rings true to me, and I tend to live by now. They said that a lot of you humans think you're in school. You think that you're here to better yourselves. You are not. You are here to shine your light. Your light is an accumulation of everything you've ever done through every incarnation, every, gift, everything that you've learned. And it is in the expression of your being that you create your doing. Now, I know that is true for me, that if I am all of these things, that I've gathered all these skills over the years, I know that I was born to be creative. I know that I was born to share. And so, in a sense, in the expression of my being, I've ended up creating my doing. My doing, whether it's a magazine, whether it's a book, whether it's a book club, whatever it is, they've all come from me expressing my being. So everybody should write their book, because that is an expression, that's a doing that is an expression of their being.
Wow.
That's
Beautiful.
so beautiful. So beautiful. Thank you so much, Sandie, for joining us today. You can find Sandie at Sedgbeer, her last name, sedgbeer.com. And you can also find her on Instagram at the No BS Spiritual Book Club, and Facebook, Sandie Sedgbeer, and YouTube, Sandie Sedgbeer. So I would just like to leave it with you telling people how they can get in touch with you, and what you're most excited about in the next 5 years of your life.
Well, I'm an open book. People, I'm happy to give my email address out. It is Sandie, SANDIE, SEDG @gmail.com. Anyone can write to me. I answer every email that I get. And what would I like to be doing in the next 5 years? I feel that the No BS Spiritual Book Club, of all the things I've done, and I've created some interesting things over the years, a lot of fun things, but of all the things I've done, for me, the No BS Spiritual Book Club is my legacy project. And so for the next 5 years, I want to devote my life to, taking this little flower and helping it become a massive garden that covers the world, and, let it reach its full potential. I would like to be part of that and leave that behind me.
That's amazing. We would love to help you do that. And I'm just so excited about the potential of the book club to direct people to these incredible people who have had books influenced, and to say what those are, because one book can change the conversation, can create community, can change someone's consciousness, can change the direction of their life. I mean, a book is really like that. It's like having a conversation with a genius person that lasts all week long. I mean, when do you get to sit down with a genius all week long? So there's really something to it that you're bringing forward. And thank you so much for everything you're doing and all the people that you've brought together. I mean, your Rolodex of people, with the scientists and the authors and the celebrities, is just astounding. And everyone I know respects and loves you so much for who you are, your consciousness, what you're doing in the world, and
including us.
Yeah, including us. So we love you, Sandie, and many wishes, best wishes on your No BS Spiritual Book Club, that it turns into this legacy and this huge garden of support for so many people. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. It's been a real